What is up, everyone? I'm Jeremy, and today I'm going to be taking this buffet. It's got a little bit of water damage, but it's really solid construction, and I'm going to turn it into a designer dupe that you don't want to miss. I found this buffet listed on Facebook Marketplace for $40, and at first glance it looked to be solid oak, and that's what it was listed as, solid wood. But as we know, a lot of times that doesn't turn out to be the case, and when I got there to pick it up, I noticed some bubbling on the top, which was a major clue to me that this was not solid wood. But after checking it out a little further, it was quite sturdy, and the drawers were dovetailed and otherwise seemed to be in pretty good shape. So I liked the fact that it had a nice clean silhouette that I could work with. So I decided to pick it up and start just going to town on the top with my sander just to get out the bubbles from the water damage. And as I did that, I started thinking about what I wanted to do with this piece. And that is when I remembered this piece of furniture from Arhaus that I constantly get advertised for, and it's the oak lay bar cabinet. I love the color green, the green version, and I love the fluted doors, and I love the really long brass handles. So I think this is giving me some ideas for what I'm gonna do with this piece. So jumping back to the top here, I am just wiping down all of the sanding dust and feeling to make sure I've got a nice smooth surface. And next I will go ahead and use a watered down DAP wood filler to act as a grain fill, but also to fill in any of the exposed particle board underneath and just make sure I have a nice smooth surface for my paint. I'm just applying this with a chip brush, and I'm going in different directions, just making sure I'm working it down into the grain and into any of the dents or scratches or areas where the particle board was revealed. And then I'll come in with a scraper just to smooth everything out and get rid of any of the excess. I also went ahead and used some Bondo just to fill in the hardware holes and a couple other areas around the front and sides, and then I'll just let all of this to set overnight. The next day I'm coming back with my sander just to, again, smooth everything out and get it nice and ready for paint. I will go ahead and seal this up with some shellac before doing my primer. Before the shellac, I'm going to just use some alcohol to clean off the surface of the sanding dust and then any other types of oils or contaminants that may have gotten on here in the meantime. And next I'm sealing with the shellac, as I mentioned, and this is a wax-free shellac, so I can go ahead and apply a water-based primer on top of this after it dries for about an hour. Next step is scuff sand, so I'm going to be painting as I mentioned. So I'm using a 220 grit sandpaper to just rough up the top layer of this top coat. So that's what this white sort of powder is that we're seeing here. It's just that top coat. I'm not trying to bust through the top coat to the wood, just wanting to rough up the top surface to give my primer and paint something to hold on to. After scuff sanding and wiping back the dust, I'm going to use this spray primer. This is a water-based primer. It's ready to be painted in 30 minutes, which is great. So I'm just going to go ahead and apply this in even strokes overlapping about 50% or so, similar to if you were using a spray gun. This primer gets really great coverage, so one coat here should be good. I am working in my garage with the door open and so it's nicely ventilated, but if you are not, I would recommend wearing a mask for this. This is kind of smelly. After about 30 minutes, this primer is dry and ready to be sanded back. So this will just knock back any texture or any kind of dust or debris that landed in it while it was drying and give it a nice buttery, smooth surface. So for this, as you saw in my inspiration, it's a deep green color on that Arhaus piece of furniture. And I had this Manor Green by Fusion mineral paint on hand, so I figured this would be a great use for it. So I am going to water it down just a little bit. So I'm going to use this whole pint on this piece. So I just added a little bit of water into whatever's left here, shaking that up. And that's going to help me get all the paint out of the can, but also water down the paint just a little bit for my Wagner sprayer. And as always, I'm just going to test my spray on a board before applying the paint to my piece. I like to do the edges of the top and then this front and sides of the piece of furniture and then spray the top last. That just helps because when I'm doing the sides and the edges, it inevitably sprays, overspray that lands on the top. And if you do the top very last, then that will sort of blend any overspray that landed up there in nicely, and you're not going to get as much texture as you might if you do the top first and then go around the piece. I'm showing this a little bit slower than I normally do. This is still about 4 times speed, I think. So, just doing nice, even, steady, slow passes, allowing the paint to really lay down and fill in all of the different areas. And because of the little lips on the doors, I do tilt my sprayer to the left and the right just so slightly so that it hits down into the corners as it goes through. I'm also experimenting with spraying with the doors on, so I've taped off the hinges, and we'll see how that goes. For the reading on the doors, you may have seen this before. I'm going to use this bamboo mat from Amazon. I think it's technically a bath mat, but it has the bamboo slats and they're nicely lined up and everything's good to go. So I'm just going to measure out what I need for the doors. I'll take off this little edging and then I'll go ahead and cut the pieces that I need. To measure out the piece, I had some spare of this bamboo mat that I was going to use for the door, and so I'd cut this one to fit earlier, and so I'm just using this as a template to cut out from this new piece. And I am cutting in the center, because there are those little holes where the strings were attaching that edging, I'm just going to cut my piece out from the middle so that I don't have to fill any of those holes. I'm also applying this tape to this before sawing it, because this will help with any splintering. I'm going to use my miter saw to cut this. I'm just going to cut it right on the edge of the tape where I marked the line. And if you can just pretend seeing me cut it, I don't know why that didn't record, but I did cut it with the saw. So next I have my two pieces here, and I'm gonna go ahead and scuff sand these before cleaning them off and then priming them. After primer, I did see a few imperfections just that were in the bamboo slats themselves, so I'm just going to add some wood filler to smooth those out. After giving that filler time to dry, I'll go ahead and just sand this smooth with 180 sandpaper. There were some spots where my filler got into the grooves between the slats, so I'm just making sure that that is kind of carved out a little bit to blend in with the rest. Before gluing them in, I will just do a dry fit to make sure everything is fitting nicely, and it is. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply the glue. I'm using Titebond 2, so I'll just apply a generous amount, making sure I'm getting around all the edges and in the middle, and then I will use a scraper just to move the glue around and make sure it's nice and even before clamping down the wood slats. And then I'll move on to the second door and follow the same steps. After letting that dry overnight, they are nice and secure, and so next step will be to go ahead and repaint the doors. You might be wondering why I didn't do this in the beginning. Well, I was going back and forth as to whether or not I wanted to actually do this reeded door detail, and so I went ahead just to see how it looked without it and painted, and it looked fine, but after seeing it, I thought that this would just add a little more interest, so I went ahead and decided to do this in the end. After letting the paint dry for the appropriate amount of time, I went ahead and placed the doors back in the cabinet, and now I am applying a clear coat in satin. Clear coats are not necessary for Fusion Railroad paint because it does have its own top coat, but it is a very matte look, which is nice sometimes, but for this case I wanted it to be a little bit more of a higher sheen, so I'm doing a satin top coat. This will also add more durability for its use in case it's used as a buffet where there could be liquids or other items that could affect the paint. All right, now we are getting close. So, like the Arhaus piece that I was striving for with the look, I'm going with these long handles that I found on Amazon for the doors, and I'm going to use my hardware jig to set up the measurements so I can go ahead and mark the holes to drill for the screws. To set up the jig, you go ahead and place the center post on the main horizontal ruler in the center, and then now I'm going to just go ahead and measure the hole width because I can't remember, and it is 12.5. So to continue setting up the hardware jig, to place the side pieces that you use to mark the holes, I will do half of the measurement, so that's 6.25. So I'll place this first one on that spot on the right, and then I'll do the same on the left. And then to check that I have it perfect for my hardware, I will just go ahead and screw my hardware on to make sure that it fits as it's supposed to before I mark my holes on the piece. And this one was off by just a tiny hair, so I went ahead and loosened up the slider and then adjusted it to fit my hardware, and then I'll go ahead and retighten that so that it's in the perfect spot. And before I get any comments, I will address these filled hardware holes on the back side of the door later on with some wood filler and some color correction. I don't record it, but rest assured, they do not look like this in the end. So to mark the holes, first off, I will put a piece of tape on the side of the door, mark the center, and then measure to the center of that area where I want to place the hole. And then I will adjust the top of the jig to that measurement and lock it in place. I think it was 1.5 inches wide, so I'm putting it at 3/4 of an inch, and then I will go ahead and set that on the edge of the door, and that will have the the holes lined up perfectly, and then I'll align the jig to the center of the door on the mark that I made on the tape before using the little punchy tool to mark the holes for drilling. Punchy tool is a technical term. This jig actually comes with 3 sizes of drill bits, so I like to just go ahead and go through all 3 of them from smallest to largest just to get a nice clean drill hole, and it doesn't splinter the back this way, so that's nice. And I do have this propped up a little bit so I'm not drilling into my floor also. Let's take a look at the beginning. So we've got some water damage and an overall kind of bland look, and this is the result. I'm super happy with it. I think the look is spot on. I love the dark green, the brass handles, the fluting on the doors. I think it all works great. How about you? What do you think? Do you think it matches what I was going for? Leave me a comment and let me know. This is the end. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.